Hey, it's Brian here. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Go Be More podcast. At Go Be More, our mission is simple. We want you to chase your dreams. Our apparel is designed to be a constant reminder of your commitment. And this podcast aims to give you the motivation and mindset to get started and keep going. In this episode, John and I speak with Masters World Record holder and legendary runner Alisa Harvey about her life and love of running. Born in Fairfax, Virginia, Alisa originally wanted to be a sprinter and a gymnast, but she found her calling in the middle distances. She set high school records that stood for decades, won NCAA championships, represented the U.S. internationally, and eventually set numerous Masters age group records. And she's still going. She shares with us the ups and downs of her journey and what keeps her motivated today. I don't think we've ever laughed this much in an episode. Alisa was such a joy to speak with. Alright, on to the episode. Alright, Alisa Harvey, welcome to the Go Be More podcast.
Thank you.
Alisa, thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled, to say the least, to dive into your story and to celebrate your journey thus far, because it ain't over yet. You're still going, which is absolutely amazing. But yes, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a chance to learn more about your story, more in depth, and obviously just talk about your amazing running career.
Things I'm totally curious about and that I realized I just know nothing about is I really know nothing about the Masters running scene. And to talk about that eventually, but I want to start with your background a little bit, like where you come from, your family, just to know a little bit more about you and where you're from. My understanding is that you're from Virginia, but I don't really know, I didn't recognize the town. Are you from a big city, small town, sort of? Can you tell us a little bit about where you were raised?
Well, I live now in Manassas, Virginia, which is part of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area.
Okay.
So we're literally like the last city that's right before southern rural Virginia.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, which you probably hear more about. That's a little closer in towards Washington, D.C. I went to a school called Thomas Jefferson High School. Now, my parents were from rural southern Virginia. And there's a distinct difference between Northern Virginia and Southern Virginia. And the way people speak, it's directly south. If you go 20 minutes down towards south, the Southern drawl is there.
So your parents have that accent? They have the Southern accent?
They did not. No, they did not. Okay. Amazingly, they didn't. I never did figure out why they didn't. But I think a lot of it had to do with their ethnicity. African Americans tended not to be, for some reason, as Southern. I guess I can't say all. Some of them, my family were, but some weren't. Right. I don't know why that is. Again, one of those questions. My parents both went to all black high schools because they were in the 60s and it was still segregated. And my mother did integrate. So she integrated the first county to integrate in the state of Virginia. So she was in Floyd County, Virginia, and she integrated Floyd County High School. National Guard, the whole 9 yards.
Really?
My father was down maybe 30 miles away in New River, Virginia, and they didn't integrate. So he stayed in the colored high school. They met, I think, at a dance or in one of the, before my mother integrated. Sorry, they all went to the same school. My mother had to travel 30 miles to go to high school. So they met at the high school. And then she decided her last year with 3 other cousins to go to the white school and integrate.
So just 1 year.
And that's where she graduated.
Wow.
Just 1 year.
Oh,
right.
That is a fascinating experience.
So then they wanted something different, and they both got married the following year after they graduated high school and moved up to Northern Virginia.
That's so young. Oh my goodness.
No. Yep. Wow. So I have, there's 4 siblings, I have 3 siblings. My oldest brother, Everett, who's now deceased. He died last year, unfortunately, from cancer, sarcoma.
Oh, okay.
And,
so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. And then my next oldest was my brother. He still lives down the street in Manassas. And then I have a younger sister.
Wow. And
in Maryland.
So were your parents did they do sports and stuff in their schools, or did they even have the opportunity to do sports in school?
They did not have the opportunity. There were no sports in those schools. So no, they did not do sports. My father was a postal letter carrier.
Yeah.
And he was the first African American letter carrier in Fairfax post office. So he was I think the first African American postal letter carrier in 1968, maybe it was 68, 69. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hearing a
Oh my
sentence like
gosh.
that, the first African American letter carrier, it doesn't seem realistic that it could be.
I know.
That it could be someone who's just like at the generation of your parent, right?
It shows you how far you're right, how much time, of course, how old I am. Okay, and how much
Stop it.
Yes, and my mother was she worked. She had 4 children pretty quickly, so she didn't work for the first few years of their marriage, obviously. But by the time we were all in grade school, she was working as a bank teller, and then she became a receptionist for an electric company, Virginia Power.
Wow.
That's how we started.
Virginia the whole time, and then you were the third. Then is that right? Third of 4?
That's correct. Yes, third.
Elementary life was suburbs. Were you kind of living suburbs in the city? I don't know anything about Fairfax either, so I'm not sure how big Fairfax is as a city.
Suburban. It is suburban, but it's it's modern. It's of course now. That was the 70s, but now it's even bigger and busier. It's really just a continuation of Washington D.C. It's just more city, but it's still considered suburbs. We lived in the suburbs. We were in a trailer, a mobile home in Alexandria. Then maybe when I was in my first, second grade, we moved to apartments. And then eventually we rented homes. My parents never owned a home. It was probably too costly. And then we moved around a lot in the area to stay in different apartments or our houses that we rented. And finally we kind of settled when I got high school age. We stayed in the same place for 4 years so I could go to the same school. So, yeah, I mean, money was tight because they're blue collar workers, 4 of us. We didn't have a lot of extras.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. And
they were high school graduates. They didn't go to college.
When did you start running then? Were you already doing kind of club running before high school, or did you start in high school?
High school. No, I take it back. I did summer Hershey track series.
Okay.
So in grade school, my 6th grade year, I used to be so fast I'd beat the boys.
Okay.
So I realized I like running.
Yeah.
It was a presidential physical fitness testing. Ever heard of that?
Yeah, we did that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I would always be the flexed arm hang champion and the 600-yard dash champion, and I beat all but one boy typically. And so the teachers were like, Lisa, when you get to high school, you join the track team. But meanwhile, during the summer months, my parents would get together and we do the track meets. You go to some high school one weekend and you advance to the state meet, and then you go on like that. That's right.
And I was reading that you were mostly a sprinter, if I understand correctly. It was later when you got to high school that you started actually moving up to what we know you now as a middle distance runner, 800, 1500 meters. That was a high school transition?
I wanted to be Wilma Rudolph because in those days of being my introverted self, I spent a lot of time on my own because, again, we moved around so much. I didn't have a chance to develop long-lasting friendships. I was always at a new house or a new neighborhood. So even though I was athletic, I like to watch TV, and I watched the Olympic Games, and I saw Wilma Rudolph or movies about her because she was beyond much older. But I saw the movie Wilma, and I wanted to be a track sprinter. I thought I was pretty fast, and I also wanted to be a gymnast like Nadia Comaneci. And so when I went to high school, my first sport was actually gymnastics. So I wanted to be a gymnast first and then a track athlete.
Interesting.
Sprinter.
So were you competing in gymnastics at that time?
I did compete, not at the competitive level because it was too expensive. So I competed at the high school level. I did join the gymnastics team, and I did compete all the way to the regionals. I did pretty well for someone with no formal training.
That's amazing.
You remember, John, when we spoke with Von Ware, who ended up becoming a triple jumper, he started in gymnastics as well, and he attributed a lot of his kind of coordination and strength and just overall body strength to athleticism.
Yes,
I guess is the right word I want to use for gymnastics.
Oh, I was so strong. I could do handstands, back tucks. I could do, all kinds of things. I was also a cheerleader for a little bit because I could do the back handsprings and the flips and all that. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've thought a lot about, just on an off note, like totally for a different conversation to dive into, but I've thought about it a lot in general. So it's really cool, the idea of using other sports, specific types of movements and trainings to contribute to running, if you're a runner and using those other disciplines or different aspects of their training to contribute to improving as a runner. I just feel like over the years, as I look back on my highly competitive running career, like when I was competing at the highest level, I'm like, I always think about like what kind of alternative trainings, because I did some stuff that was really unorthodox and it worked for me. I don't think it would work for everybody, but it worked for me. Like I did a lot of sand running, where I'd run 5 to 10 miles once a week on the sand, barefoot on the soft sand. And I'd have friends from Kenya and different parts of the country sometimes come visit and try to run with me. And I'd be running 5:30, 5:45 on the sand and they couldn't do it. Not even for a couple of minutes. And I would do it for 5 to 10 miles. But that was just something that appealed to me psychologically. Yeah. It appealed to me. It worked for me physically. And it was just something that I used as a go-to, for helping my speed work. And it really helped a lot. And I feel like ballet, gymnastics, things like that, I've heard it a couple of times and I just really feel like, man, using those other sports, I think could really help more runners be even more athletic and in turn be more dynamic as runners, so that's really cool to hear that you were into gymnastics. I think Brian's probably going to ask this, but I'll ask it. When did you kind of have to let go of the gymnastics, altogether? Because I'm assuming you were super passionate about that, but at some point you probably had to focus on just running.
Yeah, when it got dangerous, because when you get more competitive in gymnastics, the uneven bars were my event, and I wanted to do more risky moves. And I think what finally did it was the regionals. I had a mistake in my grip, and I slipped off the bars in the middle of a move and swung out and hit the floor. It was pretty ugly, and I hit pretty hard. Almost hit my head on the bar. So I just realized at that point, is it worth it? I was good at running. I weighed the cons. I didn't have formal training in gymnastics. I wasn't that good. I was much better in running. So I made the decision to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I watch the gymnastics, that's what I find myself tense, because that's what I...
Yes. That's right.
It's like, exactly. It's what makes it amazing. And yet it's like, what's amazing is so many of the gymnasts like don't have that experience. Like as they're doing it, you're just thinking, oh gosh,
Were your parents...
and I waited too long.
Were your parents ever nervous? Like, so Brian and I both have girls, I have a little 4.5 and she loves gymnastics like crazy. She can't do it right now because the gyms are closed and stuff. But, Brian has 2 little girls as well. They're super active. And is it, Brian, just ice skating? Is that
right
what the
now
girls
they
are
do
doing
ice
right now?
skating, which is less terrifying than gymnastics.
Right. And that's why I'm bringing this up, because I'm like, as a parent, I'm like, she's my first and probably gonna be my only, and I'm a helicopter parent, so I'm like, but she is a daredevil, and I can't imagine watching her doing gymnastics and just going for those bigger moves and stuff. Were your parents like just trusting or the process, or were they a nervous wreck?
Ironically, my parents were like okay with gymnastics. My mother was petrified and horrified by my running. At the end of the race, when I was just out of gas and just so exhausted, because I'd run like a horse, I just drop in bed, and she'd hate to see me so out of breath and so tired and scowling and all that. So yeah,
that's funny.
That's funny. She's like, go ahead. That is funny.
Yeah.
My mom was kind of crazy like that too, though, with the running. The funniest videos my dad from my high school days was he'd have a camcorder, and sometimes he would be trying to coach me a little bit, right? So he would say, "Here, honey, take the camera." And this is what you would see in the camera. "Get away from my son! Get away from my son! Oh no, don't touch my boy! Don't cut him off!" And the camera's just doing this. You're not getting any of the race. You're just getting my mom jumping up and down screaming because she was so worried about somebody cutting me off or something like that. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
I can kind of relate with the running. It's like nothing's really happening, but they're freaking out anyway.
There's a old comment that I remember reading where somebody was talking about how your kids, when your kids are doing something, it's like your heart is outside of your body. You just see it as, whatever is going on, their pain, you feel it differently. Like there's stuff that you can tolerate yourself that you just don't really want to see your kids have to experience and stuff like that. And I love watching my daughters learn ice skating, and I hope that, like, we'll see how they do. I mean, we have ice skating and gymnastics have a similarity in that when you get into the sport, you kind of have to choose to go all in or not.
That's right.
Because your peak as a girl ice skater is going to be like 17 years old in some ways. And so like you have to, it's very expensive and it's a full-time commitment. And so they're doing it not at that level at this point. But I think I like seeing the coordination, there's very few sports. One thing about ice skating, there's very few sports where you can go fast. Like really faster than your own body can normally go. Oh, yes,
that's true.
So there's certain little things where I see it like what makes it fun and daring and exciting, and that's also what makes it, kind of like, well, you watch them just practice and fall down and fall down and fall down, and you're thinking
right.
Anyway. So you're talking about your running, and I looked this up, and it seems to me that you broke a lot of the Virginia records when you were running, and some of those still stand. It seems like your 15, maybe 1600 meter record. And back at that time, can you describe what it was like running for in these high school meets? And were you sort of famous, or did you become sort of like a celebrity for your running back then?
Okay, no. Again, because no one really had any idea what others were doing. And so you really literally get to a track meet and, okay, who's running? And you get in the line and, wow, she's kind of fast. So by my senior year, maybe they kind of remembered me from the previous track meet or state meet. But no, it's nothing. I coach now, and it's nothing near like it is now, where they see the girl, see the star, and see her like leading the state and all that. She gets to a meeting, like, can I have your autograph? No, none of that occurred. But for me, it was that I got faster and faster. Like I moved up to the distances where I was better at. Yep. And that record you're talking about, it lasted for 29 years. It got broken in 2012.
Oh, did it? Okay.
I was there at the track meets. Yeah, so it did get broken. My best, that was 1,600 meters. My best mile was 4:42, and Sarah Bowman came in 2005 and got that record. And then I had, it was a 1,500 meter record I had until, it was like 4:17 or 18. I had that until 2012 also. That was that famous, I forget her name already, but she's a young girl that made the Olympic trials in high school. She got that one from Lake Braddock High School. So nowadays, these girls, like I say, they come out, or kids, come out with full knowledge, and they get really good training. You can learn on the internet what to do, and they get really quick, really, really fast.
Yeah. What in the world? Well, I was just gonna say, what in the world were you doing to run so fast? I mean, wow. Because I was, this is what I did. When I saw all your times at the professional level, and I said, well, where would she be right now? Right now, like today, against the best in the world, where would Elisa be? Girl, you would be right in the thick of things. I'm sitting there going, my goodness, my goodness.
Well, those stories you always say about fathers. When I went to school, I had to walk 100 miles. It's kind of, in my case, I will say most of the tracks I raced and trained on were asphalt.
Okay.
In the 80s, the tracks, even in this affluent area of Washington, D.C. area, the majority of tracks were asphalt. Our Thomas Jefferson track was asphalt. It wasn't until you got to the regionals that you get a rubberized track. So I'm training on, my spikes on asphalt until I get to the regions and the state meet. So yes, I do wonder if I had rubberized tracks from my freshman year to my senior year at every meet, would I have been even better? Maybe so. But I think for me, it was like we talked about. It was the gymnastics core and strength, and then I wanted to be a sprinter, so I started out with a lot of speed, did the 4x4 until I got moved up, and then I did the distances. I did cross country, and it all came together in my senior year.
I'll just tell you, in my opinion, the times, I'm sure they would have been better, but who you were competing against, how good everybody was. It is what it is. And you are who you are, and your performances are really what matters. The times are one thing, and they kind of like help us to kind of like figure out where you fall into the shuffle, so to speak. But no, you were out there just kicking butt. Well, and that's what I'm thinking about, is I'm like, goodness gracious, like the times just let me know where you would fall. But I guarantee you, if everybody, it's way more competitive in a lot of ways, because for some reason everybody is just aware of what's going on. So that changes the level of competition, because when you think you can, then you can. It's just one of those things. And I think that you probably would have run even faster, because you were capable of competing so well
Yeah.
and rising to the occasion. And that's why I'm like, the times are slightly misleading in terms of what you probably would have done today if you
Yeah.
were competing in the same way that you were, at any point in your career,
Well,
So
Elisa, I'm curious. You ran for 1,600 meters. I'm thinking high school right now, like sub 5, right?
Yes.
Were you running many races against any other girls who could run that fast? As a general rule, did you have a lot of?
No.
Because I know today you could go
Yeah.
to a big, you could go
I
to a
don't
big
think
race,
so.
and people would come from the whole region to compete and
Right.
run fast PRs at Nike Internationals and different types of meets. But I had never heard of them when I was in high school, and I'm younger than you are, and I don't think those existed at that time. So it was kind of
Right.
you know.
So the ones where I did the 440s and better were when I went to the summertime meets. When I did summertime,
Yeah.
I did a track club, and we traveled up to Boston. And there was one meet in particular where our track coach at the time, his name was Ralph White, he was trying to get me in this elite level mile, and they're like, "No way! She's a high school girl. She's not getting in here." It was at MIT. It was a big meet in Boston, and they had all the top national high school girl, and then they had a couple other elite and college girls. So they finally let me in the race. He kept begging, and the gun goes off. They take off, and they kind of get to a nice, slower, comfortable pace. And then the 2 laps to go, I take off and blow and lead, and I win the thing. And
Wow.
and I was surprised at winning it too, but that's where I ran the 442 and beat all these, Olympian and this, that, and the other. So I said, you're right. I didn't get to shine until I had the competition. I
yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
after high school, you chose to go to Tennessee, and you ran for the Tennessee Vols. What was your reason for choosing Tennessee?
Originally, I thought it was the Tiger Bells because I wanted to be Rimmel Rudolph. And I had to follow that whole train. But I didn't realize that was Tennessee State, so it was a different school. So I still had Tennessee in mind. So UT was just fine. I found out, as I was looking and signed the course with Tennessee, that it was where all the Joetta Clark and Delisa Walton Floyd, and it was a big, huge a great women's program. So that's why I said, yeah, I'll go UT, Lady Volunteers.
Yeah, I think of Tennessee as being a good track and field program, but I didn't realize that they've been good for so long. Going all the way back through through the 80s, through even before, I believe, just reading a little bit. And you had some good coaches. I mean, did you start with Terry Crawford?
Yes.
She was the coach there, and I mean, she's kind of become a legend in track and field coaching and stuff. So, can you talk a little bit about your experience running in Tennessee? What stands out to you now when you think back on your college running experience?
Oh gosh, it was a good one. I only had Terry 1 year.
Oh, okay.
Just my freshman year. Then she got the job at Texas and left us, and we're like, oh my God, she's going. And at that point, I actually left Tennessee. The new track coach they brought in, Gary Schwartz, had to come back to Virginia into my house and asked me to come back to Tennessee.
Really?
'Cause I had left.
Well,
yes,
what were
I
you
was
gonna
like,
do?
what?
Wow.
You
I don't even know. I was, 18. I was just mad that the coach left my freshman year. I didn't have a great year. I gained 15 pounds. I ran okay, but it was a tough experience. I didn't have a good freshman year. Yeah. So then he asked me to come back, and I did. I came back, and then things got much better. He was good. I liked him as a person.
Okay.
He knew his stuff as well enough, and I had great 3 years.
Well, you were there.
That's amazing.
You guys, I was looking at you guys broke some NCAA records and maybe an American record. I can't remember in the 4x800 meters, and eventually you won a national title. Who are some of the other runners? Just I'm curious. Who are you running with that gave you such a strong team?
Oh gosh, we had Joetta Clark, three-time Olympian.
Yeah, that's
800 meters, right?
I thought so, yeah.
And she was on the 4x8. That was my freshman year. So it was Joetta, myself, a girl who transferred to Texas with the coach, Carol Davidson. She was another, and then Kathy Rattray, a Jamaican Olympian. Kathy Rattray. So she was another, 2-minute 800 meter runner and a 51 400 meter runner. So really good talent. We had combinations of Jamaicans, we had some Irish, and we had then a very good, strong American squad. So it is a very good team.
Yeah, very good.
Wow.
So I know from reading that you ended up eventually as a senior. I believe it was your senior year. Maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. That you won the national championship
That was my junior year.
That was your
Yeah,
junior
my
year.
junior
Okay.
year, I won the 1,500 meters. The following year was Susie Hamilton's year. So
okay.
the next year, the next year wasn't quite. It was a faster year.
Oh, that's
I was
right.
at the competition, but I didn't get to win. I came in second in both races.
I was
Second in the
close.
800s. Yep, second in the 1,500.
I saw that looking at your thing. I saw you won the national title and your PR was 4:17, and the next year you had a PR of 4:09 and you didn't win. I thought, what happened? Like that's yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
after you graduated from Tennessee, did you get a sponsor? Were you running professionally?
Yeah, I ran for Athletics West.
Athletics
Mm.
West.
That is the Nike Athletic West. That was with, Mary Decker Slaney, and Kim Gallagher,
Yeah.
Wow.
and a few others. Yes, yeah, that was the 80s. That's what it was, 80s.
Were you guys ever training together, or was it really just everyone's individual and you're just on the same sort of
Right.
sponsored team?
Most of the athletes were actually on the West Coast. I was training down in Texas with a coach named Dr. Robert Vaughn, who coached Francie LaRue Smith. I don't know if you know Francie. She was a
I know the name.
three-time Olympian also
Yeah.
in the marathon and 15 and 10,000. Yes,
Yeah,
So
she's
I
got
trained with that
she's got
group.
an interesting story too.
she does.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a lot of success. I was going through U.S. championships over and over again. Getting right in there. You're always in the mix, right, with everybody.
Right.
A couple of world indoor championships that you were able to compete in. I mean, I'm a little. I don't even know exactly which. Do you have a race or do you have a period that stands out to you as something that where you were really at your peak that you think of when you think of like this is when I was at my best?
Probably my late 20s, early 30s. Let's see. Yes. Before I had my daughter, my first child. So I would say 90, 91, 92 were probably my best years. That's when I ran the Pan American Games in Havana, Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I ran up on the world best Ana Quiro from the Cuban world champion.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yes, it was a funny story kind of because they were like, no one's in this race. It's how the U.S. didn't send its best to Pan American Games because they wanted to go elsewhere to the world champs, get ready for the world champs. So the second raters, the ones that fell back into the mix, were the ones that came to the Pan American Games. And the day of the U.S. team flew out to come to Havana, the 800 meter girl, I forget who it was, she didn't show up. So it happened to be that my coach was one of the coaches, and he said, "Lisa, do you want to run the 800 too?" So I had the 800. I said yes. I did the 800 and the 15. I just made the 1500 squad, but I got to do the 800 because the girl who ran the 800 didn't show up.
Right.
So in that race, so I was kind of like this extra. So they weren't expecting me. And I literally in the race, they only had one race. They didn't do a trial final because it was hot out there and they wanted to get her done.
Right.
I had to share a lane with another runner somewhere in like lane 1. I think I got lane 1 outside 1.
Oh, wow.
The gun went off and they took off like they were running 400 meters. So I just had to just stay on back, and get where I could get. And so as we went around the track, I just started picking people off because they had gone out so darn fast and came through about 60 seconds, maybe 59.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept picking people off. And next thing I know, I was coming up on Ana Quiro. And then the crowd, the stadium just started to stand up and scream, basically, because Fidel Castro was in the stands watching the race because Ana was supposed to win it. And I came up on her heels, and then she kicked it into another gear.
Yeah.
And I came past the girl that was our number 1 800-meter runner, and I kicked it in, and she got 1, and I was 2. At 1:59 something or other. So it was a bit my PR.
Yeah.
But they almost didn't let me have it. So
did you get a chance to I'm sorry, John, one second, but I'm thinking about Cuba at that time. Like nobody was going to Cuba from the US. And
right, that's right.
Like you were one of the few people who was, it seems like I didn't even know that they went to Cuba until I was looking at the results.
It's right.
So
it was a crazy time. I was surprised.
Did you get a chance to really see the country at all? Do anything while you were there?
We did go around and visit Cuba, Havana. We didn't go beyond Havana.
Yeah.
I had a woman, one of the girls, I think she was a javelin thrower. She spoke Spanish, fluent Spanish. So she was my buddy and translator. So we went to the beaches, were gorgeous. But the village was cute and fun. And we made a lot of fun with it because it wasn't extravagant because you got a country that's, hurting for money probably, but it was such an experience that I never will forget. That the people were really, humble, and it was hard life. I mean, things were poor. It was 1950s standing still. The cars were all 1950s. Things were run down. We weren't allowed to take pictures. I had a camera ready to go, and we Americans were not allowed to take pictures of the stadium, of anything in the ceremony, the opening ceremony or anything. So, so that was the only thing.
So who was actually there? Like, were there's security or chaperones or whatever enforcing that?
There must have been, but our coaches kept saying, "Do not bring cameras." So I guess there must have been those looking out for the U.S. team. Everybody else could, but the U.S. team could not work. Yeah.
Right. No, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the few, some of the places that I competed in, like the Commonwealth Games, a couple Pan Am Games and stuff. I mean, the chaperones, like, I mean, you're surrounded by the host country's people in terms of, like, I felt like we were always supported, all the different teams in different countries. So there was always people around you. And then in India specifically, there was just tons and tons of security and all kinds of stuff for different reasons. But I just feel like if they wanted to pay attention, like certain countries and to certain teams or certain things, I'm sure I feel like they would just have the kind of the personnel and the protocols in place to do that, especially if there is a situation like the relations between those two countries, our country and Cuba. So I'm not surprised to hear that it was enforced so strictly, because I could see those types of things happening in those countries. I did want to ask you though, because it is pretty cool that you won the 1500 meters at the Pan American Games. What did that feel like? I mean, I was a favorite in Guadalajara back in like 2011, and I got so freaking close. I went too early on the backstretch, and I just narrowly missed. I got caught on the home stretch. And it would have been great because I was actually representing my home country, the Cayman Islands, since the second half of my career. And, it's a big deal. A medal in our country is a big deal. And the Pan Ams would have probably been one of the biggest wins for our country in our country's history. So I was really disappointed, at least not to even medal. I was literally like a split second from even third place, but we were all bunched up together 1 through 4, and I finished fourth. But I just felt like the Pan American Games, you don't hear a lot about it. But when you learn about it, it's actually a really big deal. And so,
yes.
How did that feel? I'm so just excited and happy that you had that experience.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned Pan American Games. That was my American standing national on the podium national anthem play, with a big, huge stadium and a stand full of people that were cheering and track fans. So it was my moment. That was one of my most memorable moments in track and field.
Can you talk about that race really quick? Do you remember that race?
For the 1500, I was fortunate enough to had the Canadian took out. She took out and she was in a strong pace. I just tucked off of her shoulder. And then a girl from Suriname, who actually became a top in the world later, she was coming on me, but it did not. At the last lap, I just went. So I had more control of that race because you have to. It's a mile, for goodness sakes, 1500. And I felt more comfortable and confident in that race than the other one. So the 800 was just a fun and extra, but I was more serious about the 1500, and it worked out perfectly. The weather was good. I won. I got a little interview afterward on the camera. And so yeah, it was a good moment.
That's wonderful.
What was your time in that for that performance? Do you remember?
I want to say 12 or 4:13, 4:12.
It is so fast.
It wasn't blazing fast, but it was
really
decent.
Fast,
Well, when you're doing the double, anytime you're doing the 8:15 double, and then you could put out anything close to 4:10, and then come back and do a sub 2. Get out of here. Are you kidding me?
Well,
That's so
and also,
amazing.
We didn't get like the Queen's treatment either, because the rooms didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have hot water.
Sure.
We had cold showers, and we had a hot room. And oh, by the way, we also had to they had to bring in lots of nutriment, because the food was, sometimes not what we were used to. So they had to supply some extra nutrition for us. So it was just kind of like fun camping, and we had a great time laughing, but it wasn't like a 4-star hotel.
I think it's so cool. That experience you had also tied with the chance to do something like doing it in Cuba in a very unique setting. That's really cool. I was thinking, also looking, you went to a bunch of Olympic trials, and I'm curious about that experience. You're in the mix with all these top runners. I know John and I have talked about his experience with the Olympic trials. I was looking. It seems like you in 1992 in New Orleans. What's funny about this is I had a coach who ran in that meet, and I know a couple people who competed in New Orleans in 1992. So I've heard some stories about New Orleans at that time. But you decided to do the double, and I always find this fascinating when you're doing the double at an Olympic trials, because I feel like it reduces your chance of making it in either one, and yet at the same time, obviously you felt confident in your ability in both events to be able to take a shot at both of them and to do it. So can you talk a little bit about that decision?
That, because for me, it truly was a question as to what race I was better in, the 800 or the 1500. I'd always scored well and done well in the 800 every time I stepped in the track, and I also did okay well in the 1500, but I was literally ranked the same in both stinking races. So it came down to which one was first and what chance I had. And that's why every darn time I gave it my all. The issue with me, which was, I look back and I can understand it now, is that heat was my big nemesis. Okay. I had a heat stroke when I was 16 years old. And don't you know, every trials from Indianapolis to New Orleans to Atlanta, I'm missing one, they were always hot.
Right in the middle of the summer, right?
My gosh,
right in the middle of summer. And my races were right in the 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, or 2 o'clock. So knowing that, I knew I had that extra on me of the heat intolerance. But again, do I pick the 15 or do I pick the 8? There you have it. I chose both because I figured I'd have problems on either. But yeah, in 96, I came very close to making it in the 800 at 96 in Atlanta. And the heat got to me badly there, but I don't think it was the heat all. It was also, I had some other issues. You know, as you imagine, as an athlete, you don't just deal with your athletic endeavors, your body, your fitness, your training. You also have sometimes have to deal with the family and and lifestyle. At that time, I had a 2-year-old, and I was living in Boston with my in-laws because my husband was training or going to school, I think at the time, and living in New York. So things were more. I was caring for a baby. You know, I was still dominantly taking care of her. There was no nanny. It was just me. And help from my mother-in-law. And I didn't have a per se coach. I think you had asked that, John, who was my coach? That's one of my questions. There was no coach. Elisa was her coach for most of my elite years. I had every now and then I got assistance from, for instance, in 96, my father-in-law was a former hurdle track coach back in the day in the 60s. So he would help me out sometimes designing workouts. But day on and day out, it was me who designed most of my training. And then earlier on, there was Brooks Johnson. I had a couple of episodes of coaching with him, maybe a month or two. And then before that, Robert Vaughn. I mentioned Dr. Robert Vaughn. He had coached me for a while, but he was at a distance. I was living in Boston at this time, and he was down in Texas. So through the phone, we would try to touch base, but it wasn't regular at that point. So usually, basically, because of the moving around, because of the baby, I was coaching myself.
Do you think?
Wow.
I mean,
oh my gosh!
Looking back on it now, is that something that you would have made more of an aggressive effort to change, to go and try to?
Oh yes, absolutely,
okay.
Yes. You know, it's because 2020. You know, you look back at things, you made a decision the best I could then, because I'm thinking about baby, family, and things were that way because of family. But no, I wouldn't do it that way at all again if I had it to do over.
Yeah. How about the decision to have a kid when you're at your peak? Was that a difficult decision? And how was it trying to come back and balance this entirely new lifestyle and get back to the level that you were at previously?
And that's the question that the great Steve Scott asked me years ago after.
Steve.
Yes. If you know Steve Scott, he's the former American record holder in the 1500, maybe mile too. I was on a plane after I had my daughter, Virginia. And I was flying up to the California Mile, and he asked me that question. So, Lisa, why did you decide to have a baby now, right? Smack dab in the middle of my, blossoming career.
Yeah.
And it was just because, at the same time, I'm also, a wife and woman. So I wanted to have children. So that was just one of my my decisions because I was an old 28-year-old, you see. And this is
Uh-huh.
also, 1993 or 4 when I had a daughter, and women had babies. I guess it was easier to say I want to have a baby than maybe now as an elite runner. You hold off. So I didn't want to hold off. I wanted to have it while I was young, in my 20s, and I had her. I had my first daughter. My daughter.
Well, when you finally you did get back to roughly the same level, it seems like
I did
in 1996.
Right.
You got yourself back even without a coach, which is impressive, right? You got yourself back to that level.
Yes, I got myself back, and I think I got out to California by that time. I got with the coach, another one, Dr. Ernie Gregoire. So I did get with him for a span right after my baby was born in 95, 96, 97. I had Dr. Ernie Gregoire as my coach. Yeah, and yeah.
Could I just digress slightly on the topic of the decision to have a baby? So I am 100% confident you're aware of Allison Felix and Alicia Montana and their work with Congress. Obviously, Alicia Montana, who I just love and admire. She's a great friend of mine. Love her more than I can express as a human being. Just a phenomenal woman. And the work that both of them, and I know there's other women, so I don't mean to exclude anybody, but I'm more close. I'm very close to Alicia, and I'm acquaintances with Allison, and the work that they're doing as it relates to fighting for contractual support from major sponsors like Nike, being very vocal, using their platform. I cannot begin to, I want to do more to celebrate the work that they're doing and to support the work that they're doing. I 100% believe in what they're doing. What do you think of the things that they're doing, being able to get in front of Congress? I think Alicia was on like the Today Show just great stuff. They're truly leveraging their intelligence, their platform to help honestly further the issue of not only for professional women to have the support to have babies in the middle of their careers, but also for minority women, the challenges of that they have during pregnancy that's overlooked by the healthcare system. Things like this. There's so much to unpack here. You can speak to it, I'm sure, way better than I know you can, way better than I can. What's your thoughts on all of that and what those young women in our sport are doing?
Well, when I first saw that episode, was it last summer, I believe, it was Allison Felix, and then, of course, Alicia Montana.
Yeah.
I was just so proud because, as you might imagine, I've been right there in their shoes, and I experienced probably almost exactly what they did, so I could vicariously be angry and be, strong with them. Yes. Yeah. As soon as I had my first daughter, came back and it was in pretty darn good shape. I got dropped by my manager. I had no coach. I had no track club, of course, nothing coming in because you're this mother all of a sudden. I'm like, hey, guys, I can still run. And also, I did have some scares during the pregnancy with my second. My first was okay. I just gained a whole lot of weight. I gained 70. I gained, 50 pounds in both of my pregnancies. So afterward, I'm, a whole different figure. But yes, the fact that I had to lose it all and then lose my contract and not, nothing be there and then struggle to get right back up again. I'm glad to see that they're changing or trying to change that because I didn't see then you just took it because what are you going to do in 1990 when I'm doing this? It was my decision to have a baby. Okay, I'm going to lose my contract and I just dealt with it. I'm glad to see that they are making it known that why should Alicia lose her contract because she decides to have a baby. So very good.
It was pretty crazy to see her out there doing her thing, competing.
I know.
And while she was I don't even know how many months she was pregnant, but
I could see,
Oh, I had no idea.
Well,
I had no idea that you could do that. I had been there
when I had my first daughter. She was born. My daughter, I have a girl and a boy. My daughter, when I was in 93, I was pregnant with her. I didn't know I was pregnant. I ran an 8K and ran phenomenal. I had no idea. So early on, maybe the first 6 weeks or so, maybe 7 weeks. But so I've been there to run pregnant. I see how it is. I can't imagine going beyond the first trimester.
Right. And doing it at a national championship.
Right.
Well, related to this, one of the things that until this came out, it was this very niche kind of issue of of contractual like sponsorships. Like one of the things about track and field is you don't have teams. You're not paid annual salaries by a team in a league sort of thing. Everybody makes their living off of an individual contract signed with with whoever they sign with. Usually it's a shoe company, but it could be multiple different companies doing this. And those contracts are basically, invisible to all of us. Like we don't really know what the clauses are. It wasn't until they brought it to the attention and made it an issue that I was even aware that was a thing. Like that there was an issue in the sport in this way. But it's kind of also speaks to this kind of, I don't know, implicit bias within the system that was working against female runners, that it wouldn't affect a male runner. And this one is kind of for biological reasons maybe, but still, I'm wondering, when you look back on your time as you were running, did you experience a lot of what you felt at the time even was sort of bias, either between sort of men and women, your experience from a gender perspective, or even from a race perspective within the sport?
Well, funny. Of course, a lot, like you said, a lot of it's hidden.
Yes.
But I remember in one case in point was that the great Susie Hamilton. Everybody knows Susie Favor Hamilton. And right. Maybe two or three teams, I believe, also for her.
Right.
I remember I was on the Foot Locker Track Club, and I think she was on it too. This was back in the early 90s. And then we were at some little dinner with the manager of the track club and one of the Kinney Foot Locker corporate guys. And I made this complaint like, well, the only reason Susie gets such many contracts is because she's pretty and everybody thinks she's so, attractive. And then the guy goes, well, why do you think you got yours, Elisa? So the point is that
wow.
he also was.
Yeah.
He was also one of the reasons I had the ability to do, I think, for me, is as a female, sure, you use whatever you can use to get your sponsorship. So if I did my hair a little better or did sometimes a little lipstick, whatever it was back in there to get a little more exposure, that worked for me. Right. Also, I did the track and the road racing circuit, which gave me more exposure, which allowed me to get those Foot Locker Track Club membership I was on for a while, sponsorship rather, and a Nike, et cetera. I was visible, and that's what a lot of the companies like. So
yeah, you're right. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the biggest criteria is they want you out in front of in the public eye as much as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. Being out there helps.
Right. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with a company wanting to sponsor who they want to sponsor for whatever reasons, may it be looks or performance or all, but it does make a difference. Everybody doesn't get the same. That's why it's kind of hidden. And you get some athlete B gets this and athlete C gets that. Racially, sure. Like I think you were mentioning that too in our other discussion with UCAN before, John, is that I'm sure my contracts were never as good as others, maybe of other races. That's part of the whole, again, what do you call it? The Wall Street type thing, image. You got to portray what's going to get the company the most money. I think I did a very good job though of exposure, and so I can't complain much really about how much exposure, how much sponsorship I happened to get for a long time. I was sponsored well into my 30s, and Avon was a big one too. I had the Avon sponsorship, the global circuit. Yeah. Yes, I would go to different countries, our cities, and then countries, and fly and speak to children or girls groups or running groups across the country. And I wore my red and my red lipstick and my Avon red T-shirt. So yeah, it was part of. I got the free makeup and stuff. So yes, I love that too in a way. It was very woman pro, and it's got me to do something I was passionate about, and speak to people. Of even African American groups I spoke to, and then children too. So, yeah.
Well, Elisa, I normally at this point I say, well, when you decided to retire, what was your thought process on going forward? But the interesting thing about interviewing you is that you've never really retired. Like you've continued to compete at a high level, and so for people who aren't familiar, you have, I believe, still a world record in the Masters. 45 years old, I believe.
Yes, that's it.
But you have a bunch of American records for different age groups, and I guess a very high level description for anyone listening. The way the age groups work is starting, I believe, at 35 years old.
Right.
They track the records for the fastest times run in every track and field event for anybody over that age of 35 years old. And then it goes in 5-year increments. So at 40,
right,
there's another sort of new record that you can try to get in 45, 50, 55, like this. So
That's
you can, if you sustain for a long period, like Elisa has, you can have a record at 35 or 40 and then 45 and then 50, and you can sort of continue to set records. And you have done this, and I think this is really amazing. So I'm going to flip the question around. Why did you decide to keep going and not retire the way most elite athletes do?
Honey, because I just kept going. You know, I wish I could say there's one reason, but I woke up one day and I'm 40, I woke up and I'm 45 and I'm still running fast. I think when I started coaching at George Mason University, I was 38, 39. And I remember showing, I was, coaching the distance girls, and I wanted to show them how to do an 800 because they kept running it really slowly. Like, guys, this is how you run an 800. So I took my stuff off, jumped on the line, indoor track, and ran 2:07 in front of these girls to show them how to run.
Without even warming up.
So I was like, okay, this is ridiculous, Elisa. Why don't you just get in some races and keep it going? And that's how I got into that darn 42-year-old 2008 Olympic trial qualifier 2:05, because I woke up at 42 and realized I still had sufficient muscle mass. I had some decent oxygen carrying capacity. I had the ability to run a sub 5-minute mile. And so I kept it going.
Hey, Brian, who did we just talk to recently?
Yeah, we've been talking with you're talking about Coach Larson?
No, Abdi.
Abdi, yeah.
Five-time Olympian.
Abdi's still going. Yeah,
how old is Abdi right now? Like, he's like 40.
He's in his 40s, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Abdi's sitting there going, why not?
Yeah, why not keep going?
Making his fifth Olympic team. He says, Abdi, when are you going to stop? He's like, I don't know. He says, I haven't set a number yet because it doesn't make sense to you. He says, I'll stop when it makes sense to stop. But right now, if I can keep making Olympic teams until somebody knocks me off. And I said, man, that's just so cool. And I think it's kind of like the same, we're hearing the same thing here. It's just like, you got to keep showing these girls how to do it, Elisa. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. When I jumped into the 10-mile races, which was like, what are you doing now, Elisa? In the Army 10-miler, I won the darn thing 4 times. Yeah.
I had some pretty darn good 10 miles. My best 10-mile race was the Cherry Blossom, I think 2009 maybe, or 2000, I can't remember. I ran 55:35 in a Cherry Blossom 10-miler. And I don't even know where that came from. So it's just one of those things where I enjoy doing it, and hey, why not 10-mile race? Let's do it. I was very competitive always, and I always managed to stay healthy. I still take my vitamins. I still drink my water and exercise daily. I don't have any vices. I don't drink. I don't smoke. Never have. And so here I am.
Well, how much for you, Elisa, how much are you motivated now by the records and the age group records that you can set versus just the daily work that you enjoy doing?
I think it's a combination of both. I'm so darn competitive.
Okay.
So I don't care if it's Scrabble or if it's checkers or if it's, a 5K. When I get in that 5K, I remember I had a 5K a few months ago before this whole pandemic thing where I was chasing down this 12-year-old girl.
Oh my God.
Well, because she
you mean 21-year-old, right? Not 12-year-old. 21-year-old.
She was a really
that is hilarious.
She was a phenomenal 12-year-old. She was in the front top 3, and I knew if I could get her, I could be in the top 3. And I kept eyeballing her, and we had to go around the curve, and it was windy. I think it was a Thanksgiving race. Anyway, I managed to get her near the end. I went by her like you thought it was the Olympic trials, but it's just my competitive edge or my competitive nature, and I'm staying healthy.
I love that you're out there crushing 12-year-olds right now. That is
yeah. You know what? Hey.
Oh God!
You say this? You're just telling that little 12-year-old there's hope for the future.
Yeah,
I did. I actually did. I talked to her after the race, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you look fantastic!" And I think I even I may have actually coached her a little bit too. So I mean, I love to coach, and I coach now. So it's kind of a fun combination.
Yeah.
Too.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple more questions I want to ask. I mean, Brian, is it cool? I think it'd be great to go a little bit over.
yeah, if you're
an
okay
hour,
with this, we can go a little bit
Sure,
longer. But
okay.
I'm curious, real quick, before we go to John's ones, because you're talking. I believe, are you 55 now, or did you turn 55?
I'll be 55 in September.
In September,
I'll be 55.
And after
beautiful.
September, are you officially, any race you run after September, are you officially in the 55 plus age group then?
That's correct. That's correct.
So I was looking at these up before. The 222, Elisa, is the 800 world record. What do you think? Is that in your sights? Is that even realistic for you at this point? What's your?
It is, because I'm still able to run probably a 32-ish 200.
Okay.
And I think that still puts me and if I can work on my speed, I get to 31, I can still manage it. 30, 32, and clip those over. Sure, I think I can, but we'll see.
222. Yeah. That's like, I can't remember the name. Somebody from Great Britain, I believe, has the world record. But September, it's perfect. One of the things about the Masters ones is you see people age into the group, and immediately that's your chance to really nail it. Right? There's a lot of records set by 50-year-olds and 45-year-olds and 55-year-olds.
Right.
Anyway, okay, John, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, just so that we do kind of educate our listeners about the Masters running scene and obviously what it's like to participate in it. I mean, there's so much there to even unpack, but in general, can you just break down a little bit about what the experience is like running as a Masters, runner and what that means to you, what that's like, what the experience is like, what people should have in mind if they're interested in competing, and staying competitive as they age,
Let's see. Well, it is every bit of nerve-wracking and competitive as any other track meet, as far as if you're going to a high school meet or a college meet or an open meet. It's still got the same aura. Mm-hmm. You're just really seeing people that are well into their 80s and 90s sometimes, that are competing, and they're competing just as seriously. They're down in the blocks. We're still getting the splits off. You develop a camaraderie because you're now with these same kind of people in the age groups for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. So it's more familial, actually. Mm-hmm. But it's truly, you're doing the same darn thing. You're just older. You're the same old athlete, just you're a little bit older.
Yeah.
Do they, this is me, I feel so unknowledgeable about this area of the sport, but do they have every year a Masters national championship meet that they host at a certain place, and you have to qualify for it, or how does that process work?
There's no qualifying. That's the only thing. You don't have to qualify.
Okay.
And that is probably because in some of especially on the women's side, it's hard to get enough participants. Mm-hmm. It's getting better now. Men's, there's a lot of guys, but there's no qualifying standards. So, but they do, when they enter you, they put you on your best time you've run recently. So you're not running against someone who's way
Yeah. And so at this point, when you're doing the meet, they run the races by the age groups as well. It's sort of the 55 plus 1500 meters, and then they'll run a 60 plus 60 1500 meters, something like that. They
do.
Yeah. Okay.
And there was some controversy with that a few years back, is because some of us women that were multiple different age groups, but we were in the same speed. We wanted to run together, but they didn't allow us to do that. So that's the only drawback, is that you're not, especially with women, because there's so few of us really at the top, at the least, that we're spread out. You got the woman from 40s is running 2:14, a woman from the 45 is 2:14, and the woman from 50 and then we can't get together. It's kind of frustrating.
That makes sense. How about from a road racing scene? I know that in marathons, for example, they'll give you your age group. If you're running a longer race, you'll enter with your age, and then they'll have sort of first prize, second prize for that in that sort of scene. But have you competed in any sort of a championship type of Masters? Are there championship races for the road running scene as well?
Yes, and they put your age on your back. So you have your age is back there on your back, and you can see how old
people behind you can see. I got to get that person.
That's funny.
Yes.
Interesting.
That's right.
Who came up with that idea? That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Let's identify how old you are first, so everybody can know.
Well,
that's too funny.
At this point, for me, I run still, but it's just as we say, sort of for fitness and meditation. Sort of, I'm not really training. But I now I realize I'm 41. I guess I'm now in a master's age group that I could, if I want to get serious, I could start thinking about this more. Although I went and looked at the records and I thought, oh my God, there's people running really fast still.
Really fast. That's right.
Really fast.
Brian, you'd be going up against Bernard Lagat.
I know,
and Abdi, and these guys are running like 2:12 and 2:11 and 2:10 in the marathon.
So I'm going to set my sights on 65 years old. I'm going to trust that they're going to retire, and I'm going to just, it's a 20-year build. And
well, don't, because they're pretty impressive. And, that's one of the reasons why I do it, too. I think for so long, people just thought, even my own mother was like, Lisa, are you going to stop running now? Like, I'm going to hurt myself if I keep running. And I want people to know that you can be 50 and still run around that track in 60-some seconds and beat I beat a lot of youngsters.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't want people to think that they're old and dried up by the time they're 50, 55 years old. You don't have to be.
Well, you're clearly setting that example, especially for the 12-year-olds. They're
Oh my gosh. I was totally thinking of a question and now it's gone. Thanks, Brian. Oh my gosh. You were waiting to bring that up again. I just know it. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, there goes my question. I don't even know what I was going to ask. No, I think it's funny. So even as we talk about that, what's kind of cool is Go Be More. One of the things that I think is super cool about your story is that, and sometimes I don't know, I don't necessarily think about it when we reach out to a guest. It's like I have different connections with a lot of people in the running world, or Brian and I have connections in different parts, just people who are doing really amazing things. And we're like, that would be a great guest on the show, but we're getting more running specific. So it's great to dive into the running world a little bit more. And that's where I think a lot of our audience is going to be coming from as we become more well-known and popular as a podcast. But the thing that I love about your story that's important, I think, for a lot of people who are runners is to think about competing still and using the idea of training for something for sure. And to hold on to this idea, even especially as we age, because I think that inspires you to go be more, to actually be more than what you think you can be. And also, I think it helps keep you young. I think that having something to work towards, something to be excited about, something to challenge you. Being challenged is not a bad thing. In fact, we need challenges. We need obstacles. We need resistance we need struggle. And Frederick Douglass said it, without struggle, there can be no progress. And I don't think that I think that avoiding struggle, I think avoiding failure, I think avoiding challenges and competition, honestly, I think holds you back from growing.
I agree.
And if you're breathing, if you're still alive, if you're above the earth, above the ground and walking the earth, you need to be challenging yourself all the time, because there's so much to live for. There's so much to do in life, and life is for living. And I think that your example is really inspiring, because for all of us, including myself, and I know Brian's already planning his master's debut. This is great.
65 plus.
But I love your story because it resonates on so many levels. But it's wonderful to be able to align it with the message that we're trying to champion on a daily basis through our apparel brand and through this podcast, is that it really is where the fountain of youth exists, is that chase, of wanting to be better and challenging yourself.
Here, I got that. I like that idea. And I think that's, even with my own career, that's why you'll find me getting in the starting blocks, doing a 400-meter dash. I've done my marathons and loved and enjoyed and did well in those. And I'll do 10Ks and 10 milers. I mean, I think we should. They were all challenges, and it did keep me driven. And you drive, and then you feel you're more healthy and you're more open-minded and all that.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
So you mentioned you're doing some coaching and stuff right now. How has this pandemic sort of shut down? Are you coaching with teams? Are you coaching individuals? Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what you're doing now and how maybe, if it's been affected by the coronavirus and the shutdown in any way?
Yes, I've coached individuals, mostly youngsters right now for sure. I just started back with my youngsters about 3 weeks ago. One of them is off at West Point now, and so he was a youngster, a
Wow.
19-year-old.
He's a
And he
Wow.
right, and he just needed some pre-academy training, and I'd worked with him for the last 3 or 4 years through his high school years. Then I have a young girl, high school rising senior, who's a 16:45 5K runner. She actually did a video of herself running a 16:45 on the track with one boy pacing her in April, during the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow.
But they have just canceled her season for the state of Maryland. So she's upset with that and a little distressed with that, but hopefully get her back. And then I have a young high school boy, local middle, in the Falls Church area. He's starting he's a very good, about a mile or 800 runner, but he didn't get to finish his season because of the pandemic. And now this is kind of affecting him. So
Wow.
they're doing well, but it's emotionally tough for these kids now trying to keep it together, but they are fit and going to be fantastic athletes.
Yeah, what's the advice that you're giving to your athletes? I'm working with a college, a couple of, doing some private running and conditioning training with, 2 college soccer, female soccer athletes right now, and a couple of high school boys, actually, just cross country runners. And they're all experiencing these cancellations, these postponements, of their seasons. And for the girls, their soccer seasons are still somewhat in question. Right now, there's a lot of modification ideas to the season before possibly the talks of canceling it altogether. So I am talking with them, probably at least 2 or 3 times a week, about the psychological aspect of how to approach this. What's your advice that you've been sharing with these young athletes? I'm sure there's a lot of coaches and parents that listen to our podcast, or that might come across it, that might need some advice on what to say.
Well, for my high school rising seniors, the girl and the boy, I've suggested for both of them is to, at some point in the next few weeks, maybe closer to September, when it's a little cooler out because it's hot out here now, to do some videotaping of some timed runs or timed efforts. Maybe get somebody there with them and run a hard 800 time trial or a mile time trial, maybe even a mile or 2 mile time trial. Something to get it on video in case things get really, locked down. You can show a coach, because that youngster I was telling you about, the female, when she showed some coaches that video, they're like, hey, that gave them some potential recruiting.
Wow.
So they want to go, they want to go to college and they want to run in school. So stay fit, but break out the camera.
That's great. This gives them something to focus on, something to train for. And it also, I've seen a lot of posts from other, semi-pro or professional runners kind of saying similar things like, hey man, all I need is the idea of a race, and I can get up for it, and obviously a lot of people are sharing stuff, of themselves doing it. And geez Louise, I mean, at all levels, the performances that we're seeing are very inspiring. I mean, some of them are breaking records even. I mean, there's
that's what I was going to say with you, John. It's like the idea of the pandemic can be an excuse to not train. But there's a lot of people showing right now that if you can focus and do the work, despite the changes to your lifestyle that it might require, you can still perform at an amazingly high level. And I think that's, I'm glad that the pros are showing that, so that the high schoolers and others can also have that example to look at and say, well, it doesn't have to be an excuse unless you make it an excuse, right? And I think that's really important. And I almost feel like it almost can give you an excuse to go the other way, which is to be even more focused on it, because what are a lot of your normal distractions and some things that might have been, areas where you lost some of your discipline in your lifestyle or something, those are kind of gone, right? So, and when those get removed, if you can turn those into productive things, it can really almost turn it into an advantage. But you have to have that mindset and approach it that way, or else it's not going to just happen by itself.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, I tell them come out stronger. That's the biggest thing. Just come out stronger than when you went into this thing. And I always like to say, it's like there's always going to be a moment when there's an opportunity to do the thing that you really want to do, and the worst thing in the world is to not be prepared.
Right. That's right.
And so I said, I like to tell anybody that when we talk about what's going on right now and they start to say, well, I really wanted to do this or I really wanted to do that, and now I can't right now. And I said, yeah, right now. At some point, there's going to be a moment. And I said, you're going to be kicking yourself for the rest of your life if you do not do the work to prepare for that moment. It might be a window, a small window, but I said, you better take it when it comes. And I said, you better be ready. And that's what I tell my kids. I said, don't you tell me for 1 second you can't still train hard. I said, that's what we're out here doing the work for a reason. And I said, you got a long career in front of you and an opportunity for a long career in front of you. And the work still has to be done. And I said, when the moment comes, you will be ready. And I said, if you're working with me, I said, I'm going to make sure about that. I said, because we on vacation, it's because there's a pandemic. I said, we still got work to do, you know? And so I like to remind them of that.
To what you're saying, John, Elisa, I have a question for you. You've been training for so long. Do you still have mornings when you get up and you have an idea that you're going to do a hard workout and you're just like, the idea of doing this hard workout today just does not appeal to me. How do you handle that feeling in your training at this point?
That doesn't really happen with me because I have such variety in what I train for. So again, I do some cross country. So I'll go down to the park here and I'll go do some dirt trail intervals where I'm on this dirt path where I go back and forth and then I hit up the hill. I go up the hill a little bit. And so it's a whole different environment. Yeah, because I'm always mixing up my training so that it's something that I do it on purpose to make it not boring. I think if you get into a routine and you're always doing track work, I'm a track runner, then stop and become a cross country runner for a while and just do grass and dirt and do a grass dirt race across. And then you switch and do just sprinting for a little bit, some little speed, work on your speed. Yeah, I've done that all my career. That's why I've done marathons, 5Ks, 1 miles, 400-meter races. I've done them all.
That's why I like the idea of, in one of the visions I have for an actual training book. And I like sharing ideas because I don't care if somebody else does it. I think it should be done because I think there's value in it. But I have this idea for taking all these different elements from different, sports, like looking at somebody like a Bruce Lee or a Conor McGregor or a Muhammad Ali or a Michael Jordan or an Alex Honnold, the mountain climber, or a Kelly Slater, a surfer, or a Misty Copeland, a ballet dancer, or, these different athletes, and say, what in the world what kind of stuff are they doing? And obviously we all know running so well. And I said, what can we extract from that and refine or tweak to be like something great for runners to use as an alternative to improve as runners? I just feel like that kind of idea is cool because it speaks to what you're saying. It is that variety, the monotony of just doing the mileage and just doing the speed work and just doing the straight running and not mixing it up. I think you're actually doing a disservice to your body's ability to perform when it comes to running. And so I'm like, being unorthodox is actually where I think improvements and changing the game, so to speak, will come from, is doing things not so much like we've done before, like trying to do it better. It's like you can only run so much better in terms of the training that we're doing before we actually do other things to contribute to that specific discipline and everything.
And I also do pool running and cycling too, stationary cycling. That's a large part of my workouts. I don't do much pool running now because of the pandemic, but I did a lot of stationary cycling.
Right.
I think these it goes back to tie it back to the beginning when we talked about you'd started with gymnastics and sort of general athleticism. I think there's a lot of strength if you're going to focus and be totally one thing and try to be the best and there can be success in that, but there's a lot of success can be gained from being good at many things. Yes. And having a lot of balance in your life and having a variety of strengths. And some of that, it sounds like what comes from you is mentally, that variety keeps you fresh also. It's not just it breaks up the monotony and it allows you to go out every day and enjoy what you're doing and pursue it in a way that is more purposeful because you're not sort of trying to overcome yourself. Right.
It is. My mind stays fresh because that's very well put. You have to be fresh of mind, or I would not get out of bed in the morning and look forward to it. So yeah.
Well, Elisa, we usually sort of end our podcast by asking our guests, what is your Go Be More? Do you have a goal for your future that you're pursuing, that you're thinking of? It's like, this is your Go Be More. I'll put it that way. I always overspeak on this question. I always just kind of go on. But
I think for me, I like being that person that motivates someone. And I think as an African-American woman, I don't see enough of my African-American sisters out there moving and doing things. Every now and then I do inspire some of that. So I want to be inspirational to that college athlete that maybe I coached 15 years ago. Why aren't you out there doing something? Get moving again. So I want to, if anything, I think I could go be more by just being inspirational by all that I do.
I love that. I mean, that's one of those areas where we talk a lot about is if you can inspire one person to make an improvement in their life or to take the next step to get to where they want to go. I mean, that's a wonderful contribution that you've made and so I encourage you to do that. And if there's anything that we can do to help you do that, let us know. We'd love to stay in touch and keep working with you in any way. I'm so glad that you came on to share your story. You make me want to get out there and run harder.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I want you make me want to go out and run harder, but I probably won't run with you because you're gonna kick my butt, which is a good thing. I love it. No, I just wanted to say really quick too, just to put it out there. We love celebrating women and celebrating women like yourself, especially because you inspire our girls. You inspire other women and you inspire men as well. And I think you're such a breath of fresh air, a story that I think for me personally, I mean, I don't know how I didn't know your story as well as I know it now. We need to tell more stories like yours. So keep doing what you're doing. Let us know if there are other stories like yours, especially women. We love to tell these stories. We have little girls and we want to inspire our girls as fathers, as men. We want to do a good job of contributing to celebrating women more, and using this platform it's an important part of why we're building this platform. It's meant to be inspiring. It's meant to celebrate so many things that are beautiful in the world, but it's important that we do these type of mission-based work where we're actually contributing to the greater good in our communities throughout the world and to society as a whole. So, honestly, your story and this interview has been quite possibly my favorite because it means so much to me as a dad with a little girl. Mm-hmm. And,
thanks.
Elise,
yeah,
we want to thank you again. I hope you go after that 222 and go get that world record, bring it back to America. Whatever you pursue though, like keep doing your best, keep at it, and we'll be watching and cheering you on.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for tuning in. You can find links to any articles or items we referenced in the show notes. Please subscribe and be sure to give us a rating. And remember to tell a friend about the show. The Go Be More podcast is produced by Go Be More Apparel. Check us out at gobemore.co. For all of us at Go Be More, we are what the world is chasing, and we hope this podcast helps you become what the world is chasing too.